Welcome, everyone. I'm going to jump right into this topic about the Antichrist. This is one of the most interesting, confusing, mysterious topics in all of eschatology. So here we go. The concept of the Antichrist is often interpreted symbolically, representing forces of evil in opposition to God's will in the world. Some take a literal view, expecting a single individual to fulfill this role. Others see the Antichrist as a symbol of systemic evil or collective rebellion against God. This will be a person. There is an element of rebellion as part of the beast government, which is established by the Antichrist, but the Antichrist is a person. We talked about Daniel's 70 weeks in episode 1. I'll put a link up in the corner for you if you haven't watched that yet. But I'm actually going to start in probably an unusual place when talking about the Antichrist. Deuteronomy 13, starting with verse 1, 2, and 3. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, "Let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them," you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. I want you to keep this passage in mind as we venture into this topic. As we talked about in the video I shared regarding the timing of the rapture, for which I'll put a link in the description and in the corner of the screen for you, I talked about how the rapture wouldn't come until the end of the tribulation. And this verse is part of why that is. It says, "For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord." The tribulation is a test for all of humanity. I pray it's a test you've been studying for. But keep this topic in mind. The Bible doesn't clearly tell us who the Antichrist is, but it does tell us what we should watch for. And the Bible may give us clues as to where he will come from. I'll get to that later in this video, so stay tuned. Jesus tells us what we should believe and how we should act when the Antichrist does arise. And Jesus tells us we will recognize the Antichrist when he's here, as long as we know what to look for. So here's what you need to know. If we are still alive when the tribulation happens, God will refine us like gold melted in a furnace. And that is always a difficult time. It's never ever fun to be stripped of our impurities and refined. I'm going to jump to Revelation 13 as it's the quintessential verse highlighting the entry of the Antichrist into the world and timeline of events. John says, "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power, and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?' And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given to the beast over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. I'm going to work through this backwards. I want to highlight the last sentence. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Wow. God is calling us to have endurance and faith through this time. Why? Let's back up a little more. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. We are not called to hoard ammo and guns for the tribulation. God is telling us, if we are to be captured, so be it. If we are to be slain, so be it. We are to be a reflection of Jesus just as he was leading up to the cross. So are we to be, as we are led to martyrdom. Why does the beast do this? Let's back up further. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. The Antichrist will say terrible things against God and everything that lives in the spiritual realm. And when that's not enough, he'll turn his attention to the people of God, his saints. Where does the Antichrist get the authority to do this? And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. The dragon is Satan, who gives all of his authority and power to the Antichrist. Revelation 13, starting with verse 11. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. Where did we hear this before? In Deuteronomy 13, and by the signs that it is allowed. Who allows this? I'll get to that in a moment. And by the signs that it is allowed. To work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, everyone, basically, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. John was told all of this, or I should say he saw all of this since it was a vision. He saw this and wrote it down because we should know it. And we are told this calls for wisdom, and let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. We've been given some of the puzzle pieces here, and this call for wisdom is the key. But it's also important to know that there very well may be pieces we are still missing which won't be known until we are closer to the rise of the beast. The beast is granted authority. Satan gives the beast his authority, but Satan isn't the one who allows these things to happen. God does. God grants permission and authority for all these things to take place. These events, while they seem terrible, they are orchestrated by God in his sovereignty. God grants authority for the beast to overcome the saints, to have authority over all the nations. Why? Remember Deuteronomy 13. For the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Why doesn't the Antichrist show up now? He's being restrained. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 6 and 7. And you know what is restraining him now, so that he may be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. Then in verse 9 we read, the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. The mystery of lawlessness is already at work. It's the work of Satan. And we know who is restraining the Antichrist, the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the restrainer, working to disrupt up and coming potential Antichrist-type individuals that Satan puts in play. We read in 1 John 2 verse 18, Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come. Therefore we know that it is the last hour. He tells us there are many Antichrists, and we can see that throughout history. Antiochus Epiphanes, various Caesars, Hitler specifically, and I believe he was the closest to becoming the final Antichrist, Nimrod, who had a world government, and more. I remember a time when people said Obama was the Antichrist. Now people are saying it's Trump in 2024. God tells us what to look for, and the Holy Spirit is restraining the final Antichrist from coming. I'm not saying that one of these I listed couldn't have been the Antichrist, but I am saying the Holy Spirit prevented anything from fully coming to completion. I know the time is nearly up, but I do want to discuss from where the Antichrist may arise, because I do believe the Bible gives us clues. I need to jump back to Daniel 9 verse 26 for a moment. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. The prince who is to come is the Antichrist. The Roman Empire destroyed the city and sanctuary in 70 AD, and because of this, among other things, a lot of denominations within Protestantism take this to mean that the Antichrist will come up out of Roman Catholicism, and that Catholicism, or the revived Roman Empire, is the beast government of Revelation. And we could argue that maybe modern-day Romania, which is a remnant of the Roman Empire, will host the rise of the Antichrist, or perhaps he's Italian, seeing as that's where Rome is. And fair point. But there's more nuance to this than the direct reading of this verse. The phrase used in Daniel is an nagid. Am means people, but it has its roots in ethnicity. It's pointing to ethnicity. I won't go into a lot of detail around this, but the idea is a bloodline or ethnicity of a people, not an empire or nation necessarily. Here's what we should know. After the reforms of Emperor Augustus, soldiers were no longer recruited from only the ethnic people of what is now Italy, but rather the armies were recruited from all provinces in the empire, the peoples in the provinces they conquered. There were so many different people groups in the Roman Empire which were conquered and then later recruited to fight in the army. The empire was massive. The people who comprised the legions that destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD were a majority provincial recruits, not ethnic Romans. Rather than marching an army hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, Rome would simply use the local recruits. It was quicker, easier, and a lot cheaper. And this is documented by scholars that the legions that made up the attacking force at Jerusalem were Syrian and Arabs from Syria, Asia Minor, and the Maghreb. That means Syria, obviously, the region of what is today Turkey, and northern Africa. I won't go into too much more detail about this, but if I were to pin down what people group I thought the Antichrist would arise from, it would be a majority Arabic people group and probably Muslim today. And this aligns with the martyrdom Christians will face as we are captured and beheaded. We see this in certain regions of the world today already. So, having said all this, who is the Antichrist? He's the face of a beast nation which has authority over the entire world. To accomplish this, Satan will give him all his power and authority. What will the Antichrist do? He kicks off the 7-year final week of Daniel by signing a covenant with many nations, including Israel. He will decree the killing of Christians and anyone who refuses to worship his image. He will invade Israel to take Jerusalem, and he'll set himself up in the temple in Jerusalem and proclaim himself to be God. Later, when the two witnesses of God arrive, he will kill them, only for the two witnesses to be revived and taken to heaven after 3 days. We know the signs of his coming, so are you watching for them? Are you ready for what is to come? Thanks for watching. If you like this content, hit the like button and subscribe.